Well, my tiebreaker for Dyer not making the list was first of all, Trent Richardson has the experience, and also I like Alabama's offensive line a lot. Meanwhile, on the South Carolina side, they've got at least some quarterback with some experience, and they have the best wide receiver in the league. So I think that Lattimore has some more help to take the focus away from him. I think Dyer is going to be the absolute focus of the Auburn offense, and he's got a very inexperienced offensive line, and that's what took some points off. It's not necessarily what Dyer doesn't bring to the table, it's what his supporting cast doesn't bring.
Right. I completely agree with that. Luke, what were your thoughts on the defensive team?
The defensive team I thought was right on point. The one thing that shocked me again, LSU only had one player on this entire list, and of course it was the defensive back, Claiborne, who I really like, and Mark Barron was a unanimous choice. I believe Donta Hightower was also a unanimous choice, and I think Donta Hightower also received the SEC Defensive Player of the Year honors in our predictions, and I agree with both that. I think Donta Hightower is poised for an incredible year. I think he's 100% back from his injury, and I think he's ready to live up to his potential.
Yeah. Let me say this: as an Alabama graduate, I know Donta Hightower personally. He's a very, very nice guy, great character guy. And with his injury, I saw him back in. I went over to Tuscaloosa to help out with the Tornadoes back. I guess that was late April, early May. I spoke with Donta and Josh Chapman. Donta, I'll tell you right now, he's lost about 25 pounds. And just shed it off, and added more muscle. He looks a lot more lean. You'll notice that seeing him on the field this year. I personally had Mark Barron as Defensive Player of the Year. I think with what he's done, with his track record, and could have gone to the NFL and done great things already. I think he's coming back. Personally, Donta needed to come back for another year. With Dante's size and with his experience, also, I think you can go either way. One of the other things that really stood out to me, Stephon Gilmore from South Carolina, he was almost unanimous. There was only one person who didn't vote for him, as well as Kentrell Lockett and Danny Trevathan out of Kentucky. So I think the defensive team definitely ended up very solid.
Yeah, I absolutely love Stephon Gilmore. This is a guy that, had he lived just a little bit closer to Alabama, I think that he would be wearing crimson right now. It was very close between Alabama and South Carolina. In the end, it's very, very hard to overcome that pressure from your home state, especially when South Carolina was on the upswing like they were when Stephon was being recruited. But I love this kid. I think he's going to be a phenomenal player at the next level. One other thing that shocked me a little bit was Omar Hunter making the list from Florida, and this is a kid that has a lot of potential. We didn't necessarily see all of it last year, but he has tons and tons of potential, and I think that it's more about what we think he can do rather than what he's done that got him on this list.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. He might be the one guy on the list that is on there for basically on straight potential. Omar Hunter, his weight 307 that's by far the biggest on our defensive line that was selected. His height's only 6'0", and I bet the 6'0", usually when you see 6 feet listed, that's generous. With Omar, he's a kid out of Atlanta that I followed for a while. I think one of the biggest things was, like you said, with the LSU, people wanted to get an LSU player on the first defensive team. He's the only Florida player on the first team defensive team. I think when people sat down to make the team, to write their team down, you assess the defenses by team. You say, okay, who's going to be the main guy on the Florida defense? Who's going to be the main guy on the LSU defense? Alabama, Arkansas, Auburn, Ole Miss, blah blah blah. But I think that with Omar, people wanted to put somebody from Florida on the team. The defensive line really doesn't really blow you away that much this year in the SEC. You don't have somebody like a Marcel Darius or a Nick Fairley. So I think that some of these are toss-ups. I think from our list, you can look at Kentrell Lockett as somebody that's going to be probably the best defensive lineman, in the conference. I also love the pick with Jake Beckett out of Arkansas. So I think those are two solid picks. We'll see what Omar has this coming year.
Yeah, I agree. And here's one other thing that I think is very telling. Georgia ended up with, I believe, 5 players total on the list. Most of them came from either special teams in the kicking department or they're all on offense. They had no players on defense, if I remember correctly, and
They don't.
I think that's exactly the way Georgia is. I mean, they have not been known for their defense lately, and they've got to turn that around if they want to help Mark Richt get off this hot seat. And I know that we predict Alabama and South Carolina to meet for the championship with Alabama winning, and that's what I predicted. But a lot of folks out there have Georgia winning the East this year. And that Georgia-South Carolina game right there, the third game of the year for Georgia after a tough Boise State matchup, and then Georgia plays some Little Sisters of the Poor. Then they host South Carolina. That game is absolutely monstrous in terms of who ends up champion of the SEC East.
Yeah, I think looking ahead to the schedule, you couldn't be more spot on. I think with the University of Georgia and South Carolina facing off each other, I think that's going to be the battle for the SEC East right there in the third game of the season. I think it's going to be huge, a huge game for those two. I think Georgia has to finish as a guy who knows a lot of Georgia fans and Georgia boosters. Georgia's got to win the East this year, Luke. I mean, they have to bring something to the table. People already count. I think a lot of people have counted them out. Most people decided South Carolina would play Alabama. That was our prediction for the paper. That was definitely what I predicted also. But I wouldn't be surprised to see some of these young guys in Georgia do some things. And with the kicking game they have, I mean, people talk about how bad their defense is. And, I mean, yeah, it's not great. But with a punter like Drew Butler who can launch the ball literally to the other side of the field and not even really think twice about it, he's a great weapon to have. And you got Blair Walsh who kick a 50-yard field goal and while he's practicing, while he's joking around. I mean, those were both unanimous decisions. You also got a guy like Brandon Boykin who plays on the corner. He's an Atlanta product. He's a great corner, and he's an even better kick returner. At only 5'10", 185, he's a very dangerous player. I think him and Joe Adams were great picks by our staffs, and I think they're both going to do well in the return game. But I couldn't agree more with you on South Carolina versus Georgia for the East.
Well, here's one other final thought on Georgia. I think you're spot on in terms of this has to be their year. They don't have a choice because you think about next year with Georgia, and I know I'm getting way ahead of myself, but 2012, Georgia's going to have to go to South Carolina. Alabama rotates back on the schedule, and they'll be traveling to Tuscaloosa. And they'll also travel to Auburn. And while we don't have a lot of faith in this year's Auburn team, I think we could all agree that in 2012, Auburn's going to be right back up there for contention for the SEC title. So things are getting really, really hairy for Georgia very, very quickly. And if they don't do something this year to back up Mark Richt, it might be lights out.
Yeah. I think I think and have thought for the past 2 or 3 years of Mark Richt's reign's coming to an end. He's gotten great players in, but let me tell you something. He's gotten great players in for the years he's been there. Caleb King, the senior running back for Georgia this coming year, he was one of the most highly recruited running backs, definitely out of Atlanta, possibly even the Southeast. I know in Georgia. Saw Caleb King play numerous times in high school and just an animal. But I think maybe he's one of those guys that maybe peaked out too much or either got in the University of Georgia program and just really kind of mellowed off. I think they also have issues with Sean Ely. He's a returning rusher coming back, and he's gone. He left the team. He'll now be at Jackson State. So they've got some obstacles that they're going to have. You know, that just because they have all these new freshmen, I don't think you could just expect all the pressure on Georgia. And I don't think too much will change. An attitude needs to change around there more than players.
I think that's exactly right, JD. Well, listen, thanks so much for being with us, and this is a lot of fun, and I hope this becomes a tradition and something we do every year.
Sure, yeah, let's keep it up, and Luke, I look forward to the coaches show tomorrow.
We'll see you then, buddy. Thanks a lot.
All right, Luke, thank you.